This is the $64 million
Now
question.
that we know what helps our eating habits, diets, and supplements, what about nutrition timing? There's this old wives' tale that you could get fat if you eat carbs after 6 or if you eat just before bed.
So I think the English have a saying, they eat, what do you call it? Eat like a king at breakfast, like a prince at lunch, and a pauper at dinner. Chinese have a saying. Okay, the Chinese have exactly the same saying, but in Chinese. Is there any truth to it? I think there is some truth to it, though. Like most things, it's overstated. And what do I mean by this? Well, look, we are diurnal creatures, meaning that we are evolved to be awake when the sun is up and be asleep when the sun is down. As a result, our metabolism is highest when we're awake to make sure we can avoid becoming food and so we can find food. Okay. Whereas it's at its lowest when we're asleep, because why do we need to be burning things if we're sleeping? We need to conserve energy. So you can imagine if you have given an exact number of calories you're going to eat during a day, you can imagine that if you ate a lot of it at breakfast, then you have the whole day in order to burn it. Whereas if you have a lot of it at dinner, which is what we're doing at the moment, then you are about to enter the period of your lowest metabolism. Now, the problem with the overstatement is that at some point, your body's energy balance equation will kick in and will say, well, okay, I have enough energy on board. But undoubtedly, from a epidemiological perspective, it's undoubtedly true that you can eat at different times of the day and it actually will influence your metabolic status. So for example, famously, shift workers have a slight increase of chance of type 2 diabetes for this very reason, because suddenly they're awake at night, they're doing this, their metabolism is going all wonky, they're eating at times of day, and they are actually at I'm not talking about cause type 2 diabetes, but if you look from population basis, shift workers have a slightly increased chance of diabetes. So there is your nuance, where undoubtedly there is going to be some truth. And I guess the one advice that I would give is, say you have to cut some food out to lose weight. Okay, that's the only way you're going to lose weight. Then perhaps I would not do it from breakfast. If anything, I would cut out your dinner calories and keep eating your breakfast, and that would probably be marginally more effective than if you did it the other way around.
I see. You've also brought up some like epidemiological.
I know I can barely say it.
Epidemiological studies, right? And I've seen actually some criticism coming along with that saying that there's recall bias, it's very hard to control. There's a lot of confounders that they don't actually take into account of that. For example, I could think of some criticisms for the shift worker study that you've referenced, because I've also seen that, but maybe that could be because all the stores are closed, so the lack of healthy options at the time could play a role in that. So what are researchers currently doing to kind of overcome these like adversities when it comes to research?
Okay. So gold standard in terms of trying to understand if an intervention, whatever the intervention might be, exercise, drug, diet, works, is a RCT, a randomized control trial, which means that people are randomized in, you're given either A or B, and you see how it works. This works very well for drugs, because what you can do is someone's going to come in, drugs are pretty much, you can disguise them in a pill, and you can say, here you go, you take this, and only I know what you're taking, and you can ask the real question, does it actually work? This cannot ever work for diets and for lifestyle. Why? Because you cannot disguise that I'm going on a vegetarian diet or on your keto or what have you. So we know. So therefore, all of these epidemiological studies are always going to be observational. Okay, so how do you therefore take into account of that? Power. Okay, first of all, you want as best, and you will never be able to remove the problem of it being observational and not an RCT. And so what you've got to do is the cohorts that you study have got to be large. They've got to be as well characterized as you can. And crucially, you want the observations to be replicated in a number of different types of cohorts. Now, does this mean that all of the problems go away? No, because who volunteers for these cohorts? This is an important question to ask.
Bias.
Selection bias. And for example, UK Biobank, which is a 500,000 person study within this country, we now know, and I didn't show it, this paper is being published, is that there is a health selection bias, because the people who are slightly healthier, who are more middle class, who have the time, the wherewithal, they knew about UK Biobank, will go volunteer, right? Whereas the more unhealthy people will not. And so you need to keep all of this in mind in order to make the observations. And we are beginning to make inroads now into understanding how these work, because now we're looking at truly large cohorts, 500,000 people, big cohorts. And as more and more joined up thinking is around the world, we're now looking at different ethnicities. We're now looking, hopefully, at slightly different socioeconomic class, different parts of the world. And if they begin to show similar things, then I think you can begin to increase the confidence that the observations are going to be, at least there's going to be truth to the observations. But point taken. There is always epidemiology is rife with these pitfalls that you need to go into it with your eyes wide open. Otherwise, you're going to make the wrong type of conclusions, or try and overstate the conclusions that you actually get.
Right. Okay. And staying on the topic of research, I've seen an article that was saying about 80% of your height is determined by your genes. I'm wondering how researchers come up with such a number. Like, how did they separate the environment out? Why such a specific 60 to 80%? How was that derived?
So most of these numbers, these are called heritability, and heritability is the percentage of a given variation of a trait that's down to the genes versus the environment, have been done using twin studies. Okay, you take identical twins, 100% of genes shared, and non-identical twins, and they share 50% of genes, and you sort of work out what happens in the given traits. Now, then you might say, but wait a minute, twins are brought up in the same household, and that's true. Okay, so how did people get away from that? Well, we live in sometimes an awful world, and actually there are a large number of twins, too many, who are separated at birth and are raised in different countries by different people, thousands. Okay, and these are very, very valuable cohorts, because then suddenly what we have is we have genetically identical human beings of 50% that are raised separately, and then 25 years later meet on Oprah or something, and show up. And then you begin to look, says, okay, all right, I'm going to try to look, well, how, are they the same body shape, the same body size? And then you can then begin to look at and actually calculate the heritability. That is where those numbers come from. So height is 85%, it's actually higher than 80%. Body weight is between 40 and 70%. And those numbers have come from twin studies and adoption studies as well.
I see. And does the sample size not play a significant role in that? Because I can imagine the amount of adopted kids or children or twins separated at birth must be quite statistically low.
Thousands.
Right.
Thousands of twin pairs. So and it's enough to actually. So what then happens is, once you have the discovery cohort of the number, and you actually get the number, and you get thousands, because obviously there are going to be millions upon millions of twins who are not separated at birth. But at least even you look at the papers, there are thousands upon thousands of twins that have been separated at birth and been recruited and actually come on. So enough to give you a range of an answer, so that you're within the ballpark. Yes, you're right. I think the ultimate precision and this and that, I would probably say there's going to be plus or minus, a few things. But statistically speaking, with thousands, you are going to be able to get to a reasonable ballpark.
Last question then. What does the future hold for Dr. Yeo? Are there any future projects or key research ideas that you're working on?
Good question. So research-wise, at the moment, so the brain controls food intake, and that's what I study. As a result, actually, most of the circuitry within the brain has been worked out from mice, because they're mice and we can work with mice. But mice are not humans for any number of different reasons. But so we know actually very little about the human brain when it comes to food intake control. And so at the moment, I've been funded to do using post-mortem donor brains, and begin to actually do single cell sequencing of the human feeding circuitry region in order to try and identify whether or not the same pathways and the same molecules are there. So that's a big project that's actually happening in my lab at the moment. Then in terms of what else is happening, I've got a podcast on at the moment. I've just finished the first season. Dr. Giles Yo, Choose the Fat. So do listen. I think we talk it's available
I'll plug it in.
everywhere.
I'll plug it in.
It's available on everywhere that you can actually find it. And I'm thinking about book number 3 at the moment. I shan't share anything because I haven't. My agent will kill me. So I'm still thinking about things. And so yeah, that's what's going on in my life.
That's fascinating, Dr. Yo. I really hope to have another interview sometime in the future, maybe when the book's out again. And thank you for the opportunity. Please check out his book. I listened to the audio version and I finished it within 3 days, as it was like genuinely entertaining, as he has been throughout this whole interview. Thank you, Dr. Yo.
Niklaus, it's been a pleasure.